Amy Morgan, the feature writer for the Marriage Initiative, and I am delighted to introduce you to Andrea Mrozek. She's a senior fellow in the family program at Cardus, a non-partisan Canadian think tank where she studies and reports on the ways that society's institutions can work together for the common good. Andrea's career journey has encompassed journalism and think tank involvement in both Europe and her native Canada. Prior to joining Cardus, she was executive director of the Institute of Marriage and Family Canada, where she wrote and spoke about marriage, childcare, and women's issues. She co-authored the 2024 book, I Do? Why Marriage Still Matters, with colleague Peter Jon Mitchell, and has written a number of influential pieces, including Private Choices, Public Costs, How Failing Families Cost Us All, about the public cost of family breakdown. Andrea, thank you so much for being here.
It's a delight to be with you. Thank you.
Well, through your public policy work, you advocate for marriage, most recently through your work at Cardus. But tell us a little bit, what is a think tank and what does it do?
Yeah, a think tank is it's a space for quasi-academic level research that might be a little bit on topics of interest, specifically family, for example, the public policy pertaining to family. It's a place where you can work in a sort of academic, almost university level environment, but be quite specific about the topics that you address. And some might say there's more freedom there to align your vision and values with those of your founding, your think tank and the founders. So Cardus is a Christian think tank, and we address the issues that we take on from the perspective of a Christian worldview. And that's not something that you necessarily would have the ability to do at your average Canadian university these days. So that's partly what a think tank is, and just engaging the public policy and getting into the research and presenting it specifically to decision makers in Ottawa, where I live.
Okay, so you research, but in a kind of a private realm. You're not funded through a university. I've always kind of not quite understood this and wanted to know. So you researched in a private realm, and then you still are doing policy recommendations and writing things. So kind of like a university professor, but with a little bit more freedom.
That's one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is to think of it as the longest, slowest form of journalism. You have like radio that's broadcasting 5-second snippets, and maybe you have magazine articles, which would take longer to write and research and produce. And then think tanks would be at the long end of that, taking some time to dive into topics in depth. And presenting that in a readable way. So that's another way to look at it. I did come out of journalism. I did not get a PhD. So, you could consider it to be a kind of an academic landscape, but also part of the journalistic landscape.
And probably much more readable.
Well, when I did my MA, I was very unreadable. It's true. So, you grow and mature, and you learn to write in a way that people might actually like to read it.
I love that. Well, and as you said, you're in Canada, and I know sometimes in your writings you use the word North American to kind of describe attitudes that are similar between Canadians and Americans, but then there's some that are different as well. Could you touch a little bit on what you found kind of through your work, and then we'll get into your book, but kind of through your work on some of the prevailing themes about marriage and family? And you can talk about similarities, differences, all that.
So I think the cultural landscape in Canada and the United States today is, in the broadest of themes, quite similar. And so you see that lackadaisical attitude toward marriage, for example, and you do you, and kind of marriage as a nice thing to have, but not actually necessary. So that, in the broad strokes, is true both sides of the border. I think that there are distinctions, though, one of them being Canadians love living together a lot more. There's a higher rate of cohabitation. So we can talk about that later if you wish. It's in no small part courtesy of one province, Quebec, which has an extraordinarily high rate of living together. They've kind of abandoned marriage at a higher rate than other places. So the cohabitation factor makes us a little bit different. And also in the States, what we notice is that people yeah, they like marriage more to the extent that they will get married and divorced and married again and divorced and married again. And so you have the scholar Andrew Cherlin writing the book Marriage Go Round. So that's a uniquely American phenomenon. I think people in Canada are less likely to remarry after divorce, for example, and more likely to live together. So but in the broad cultural landscape of what it looks like for young people setting out, and I know we can get into this a bit later too, but the life script and the delayed marriage and the sexual revolution norms, all those are very, very similar, both sides of the border.
Yeah, well, and you kind of followed some of that life script, a little bit of it when you, not everything you just mentioned, but in kind of that delayed marriage where you're a real advocate, but part of that was from your journey. So take us back there. We always like to help our marriage champions get an idea about who the people are that we're highlighting and what their journey was.
Oh, well, never in a million years would I have thought that I would have landed where I am in this kind of realm of researching, writing, and advocating for marriage. Just wasn't in my, university years. I did think I would become a diplomat and live abroad and this kind of thing. So, yeah, I grew up in Toronto in a more or less secular community. And so marriage was not top of mind. It wasn't a place where I had a large family around me. My parents are immigrants, and so we were the only ones living in Toronto, a little island, as it were. Our family was quite isolated. And so I think that kind of affects you in the sense of like family isn't around you all the time. And, there are some beautiful values from my family around like a high value on education and learning, and that's great. But if you don't partner that with some family norms, then you can quickly follow the culture into a pretty delayed marriage script, which is what I did. So I got married at 39, and then I did want to have kids, and we had a daughter who's a real blessing, 1 month shy of 43. So these things came together for me quite late. I just didn't follow a trajectory of being someone who was like really geared toward family life early on, probably courtesy of where I was living and the circles I was traveling in. Although my parents are together and like they're immigrants, and immigrant values on marriage are often, they elevate marriage above what a standard North American or Canadian sort of mantra would be. But nonetheless, I didn't really have that family influence as strongly in my life. So yeah, marriage came quite late, and that's what we're seeing. And I was beyond the average age at first marriage, put it that way, which is getting older and older. That average age at first marriage is getting older and older, and I was well beyond that.
Well, and again, like you said, I mean, that's kind of the life script of the culture. That's what, the whole girl boss thing that everything is saying. That's where you should find your happiness and fulfillment, is in your very rewarding career, which you have. But you found that, yes, you love your career and you're great at it, but it wasn't until you saw the blessing of family that your eyes really opened. And
yeah, and I think that's kind of a gift to a lot of your viewers and listeners might actually really desire marriage and find that they can't achieve it. And, to some extent that was also true for me, although the culture being what it is, the priority I placed on it reflected the culture. But nonetheless, there's a lot of people listening and watching, I'm sure, who also would love to get married and find that they can't. And that is very true of a lot of young people today. And so, yeah, I think it's kind of a blessing that my eyes weren't really open to particularly the beauties of having a kid until I had a kid. So, that protects you from falling into a kind of a depression if you don't have a kid, for my personal story. I'm sure a lot of other people are, maybe more attuned to what they desire out of life than I was. But it did definitely open my eyes to that beauty and to the blessing it is to be able to balance your life with serving others. Essentially, like small children are an exercise in not getting to put yourself first. Oh my gosh, I look back at my life, and for 20 years I worked alongside my colleague, and I would come to work and say I'm tired, or you use the words I'm busy, and then once you have a kid you're like, yeah, I wasn't as tired as you were. Let's put it that way.
Oh yes. I have 20 something sons, and yeah.
Yeah.
Neither married. So we know when they think they're busy, and yeah.
It was busy on my own terms. It is busy, and I don't want to denigrate people who, have a vocation to living out their career path either. But it's a busyness on your terms, and you can typically sort of make decisions on your terms and not on the terms of a crying baby or whatever the case may be.
Well, I love how you just framed that, Andrea, because that's one of the things that really has struck me the most about you is your gentle tone and your really willingness to be welcoming in your conversation. And that comes through in your book, that I do, Why Marriage Still Matters. You don't, just like you did right there, you're very quick to make sure to leave the door open for in a gentle way while still putting forth your opinion and your statement. You're careful not to stomp on anyone's toes, and you walk that line in a really beautiful way. I really love that about you. So let's talk about your book and what you say there about why marriage still matters, and in a way that you frame it to be an attractive option, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for those compliments. I hope we're creating space and for people to be able to ask the questions. They need to know that in asking questions, they might come to different answers, and that's okay. I think my primary concern for our culture, both sides of the border, is we're just not asking the questions. They don't even enter into our thinking. It's not placed there as an important thing. So why would you ask those questions? And so, the question mark in the title is very much deliberate and creating space. I'm also just cognizant in the book, we're very cognizant of, even within Christian community, there's a loss of knowledge and language. And so you might have attended church every Sunday of your life, but still not have any language or logic to why marriage. It may be promoted from the pulpit. You may know that, when you go to Catholic Mass, that marriage is a sacrament and it's sacred, and that, divorce isn't a, top option there. But if you don't have that information around why, then it is harder to adhere to your Christian worldview or your values. And so when that's one of the audience groups you're going to be speaking to, that's where you find a lot of the people who are bemoaning their singleness or want to get married, want to have children, but find that they can't. So you got to be, I think, cognizant and especially sensitive to those people struggling to make their way in a Christian community, but not being able to find the life choices that they want.
Yeah. Well, again, you encourage people, like you said, to ask the questions and reflect on marriage and consider it for themselves. And you've started with the research that for a lot of us in kind of the marriage champion realm, we've heard this research. This sounds, we're all drinking the Kool-Aid, but you said it's surprising outside of this bubble, how really this is kind of the best kept secret. So let's talk about that. You really, you have is it chapter 2 that really talks about why marriage?
I was convinced that was going to be the most boring chapter of the book. It would be the chapter that people skipped over to the more interesting parts, on the cultural trends of how marriage has shifted and changed. But no, chapter 2 is where we just itemize all of the benefits of marriage for men, for women, for children, and for I think fertility is a category there, and for society. So when we itemized that, it was surprising to me that people were like wanting to know that. So for people who are outside of like the marriage champion movement, the health benefits have been proven, the stability and having your back factor for cancer treatments, for heart health. The research really points to you having a better chance of surviving some of those health incidents if you're married. Or in a long-term stable partnership, I should say. But, really marriage is the gold standard for that long-term stable partnership. So I think part of what we're trying to say is like, instead of that lengthy phrase, the long-term stable partnership, just go for the gold. You might as well, name it as marriage being the gold standard for that. So those are some of the health benefits. I don't know. Did you want me to get into the by men, by women sort of? Or...
Actually, the study, the cancer and the heart health study were two that I had not really seen it described in as much detail. Because again, in the marriage champion world, we've heard, oh, people are healthier, people live longer. You hear those kind of glossy phrases that sometimes make the headlines in the American newspapers, but there actually were some studies about cancer and heart health, right? Like you said, that people with the long-term partnership, i.e. marriage, could you just, because it was done in Canada, right? Could you just give us like a 30-second detail of that? Because I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, well, I don't know if it's done in Canada, but Sue Johnson is a name that may be familiar to you, and she wrote a book called Love Sense and other books, and she's really speaking about attachment at the marriage level, not at the mom-child level. And she was a Brit who was transplanted to Ottawa, Canada, actually. And before she passed away, we talked to her and enjoyed working with her to some extent. But she had done a trial study, I believe, at the Heart Institute here in Ottawa. And it was, I haven't reviewed that study in detail, but the gist of it was that they were testing how they were studying how partners were able to better support each other, particularly at the Heart Institute through cardiac events. And so the results showing, of course, that you do better when you do have that support from a partner. So that was one of the studies cited in our book.
Yes. And I just thought that was so, because again, it's easy to say, oh, they're healthier. But when you said, actually, you're healthier in a cardiac event, to really even get it down to, marriage has so many benefits. And you said that was kind of one of the wow factors, because we've also known about children and the two-parent privilege. And I'd like you to talk a little bit about that. But sometimes you said, like, for people personally, they're more interested about their own personal self than about the benefit to the children they may or may not have,
Yeah, that's right. And that was a section that isn't, frankly, as well written in the book as I wish it to be after the fact. But there are benefits of marriage for women specifically, which was kind of a surprise finding for the culture at large, because you get taught through gender studies departments, et cetera, that marriage is oppressive, detrimental, and that would be taught specifically as regards women. And so to find out that there are benefits, women who are married and have children are the most happy. That finding has been found again and again. But the weakness of the book, I'd say, is we spoke about the benefits of marriage for women as kind of being, coming through having children, because, obviously one of the possible quote unquote side effects of having sex is to get pregnant. And if that happens, then marriage is protective for your children. And then I had a bunch of young women, not just one, come and say they didn't find that really compelling, that they should only benefit from marriage through their children. And that's when I realized I sort of shied away from a topic that maybe I didn't grow up thinking I'd be talking about publicly, but marriage is protective of the sexual act for women. And, in broad strokes, statistically, men and women experience sex differently. And there's a chance outside of marriage that sex can become a bit predatory or utilitarian, that women will experience the sexual act differently from men do across the board. And so marriage is protective if you are having children exclusively, but if you ever wish to have sex, marriage is kind of that package that it compels people to buy into other aspects of life, the financial, the economic, the social, the home ownership, what have you, as well as the sexual. And then it basically is, providing for the sharing of a life beyond just having sex in a dating relationship. So I don't even know if I'm explaining that well this time around, but there are benefits of marriage for women specifically, and it's not exclusively because it's protective over your children. Though as a mom, I think that is important. Once you have the kid, you want to know your kid is protected.
Yes. Well, and I love that you said sharing a life together, because truly marriage is a lifetime. And even in, like we were talking, when you're 25, you think you're going to be, young and beautiful and healthy forever. But, as things happen, as you get older, life changes, your body changes, your health changes, and having that person to come home to, the person who's looking forward to seeing you, the person you're going to do life together, whether it's helping your husband, helping get your bag on the plane. I mean, I'm sure, most long married couples, you see us in the airport, you see, he watches my bag while I go to the bathroom, and then he does, he dropped his ticket, and I've got his, and I've got the tickets on my, you have a system of doing life as a team.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, marriage has become, maybe particularly so in Canada, but it's become controversial. It's something that is difficult to talk about. In fact, when I applied for my job at the Institute of Marriage and Family Canada, now this is 20 years ago, but I said I would tackle any topic but marriage. And that just speaks to, and I got the job, which is wild, right? And for a season, all I did was childcare policy and other aspects of social life and community cohesion, that kind of thing. But I didn't want to talk about marriage. I didn't want to go there because it's controversial. But one of the last remaining things that we all seem to still accept is that lifelong principle of marriage, which does create, that's a beautiful aspect of marriage. Something in a very transient world and an unsure world. It is that one relationship form that is secure, and you're not wondering whether the person wants to be with you or will they be there the next day. And cohabitation and marriage are just, practically speaking, entirely different. They're entered into for different reasons. They are exited more in different ways, namely cohabiting relationships, even as long and as stable as they can often be, statistically, they do end with a greater propensity than marriage. So yeah, that's one of those things in this world today, I think, where we're all feeling a little off kilter. Lots of things are happening that are causing fear and unsure, a lack of sureness. I think that's important, that you have that stability in your private life.
Yeah. And you talked about the institutional marriage, and that kind of is what I was describing is, you're a team, you're working together, you're going through life together. You have, there are things I do well, there are things my husband does well. We're moving forward. And you said that there's been kind of a shift to the soulmate marriage where the love and emotional attachment idea has kind of conquered the idea of that lifelong partnership, and not a good shift.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. Nothing's good. You're trying to pitch marriage to greater public. Probably talking about it as an institution isn't going to be the big selling feature. But we did remark in our book that marriage is less of a rom-com when you're going to the movies. It's more of your adventure story. And that gets at the institutional model. Everyone loves a good adventure story, like Tolkien, Lord of the Rings. These things are popular too. Yes. But they have more twists and turns. They have more ups and downs. And you're really clinging to this security of your marriage throughout all of that. We could talk about virtues that have diminished in popularity, like duty and honor and obligations and that kind of thing. Today's, the way we look upon our romantic attachments actually does, in some senses, put a lot of pressure on the partner or on the romantic attachment, that it has to be all things at all times and always, a soaring high with the beautiful music playing in the background. We're not saying any of that romantic feeling is wrong. That's going to be there, but it won't always be there. And when it fades, people need to know that that's normal, not a problem and a reason for divorce or, breaking off a relationship. So, the adventure movie, not the rom-com, is kind of what we're angling for.
Yeah. Well, and you brought up divorce, and you talk about how it is emotionally difficult. And you also in the book are very tender in the way you approach that, in a way to, really address people's feelings, but also talking about, support marriages that are formed and learn how to weather the rough patches.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the divorce revolution, I think, really came out of a good idea, or the motivation had at least some good aspects to it, which was that you didn't want people to be trapped in an abusive marriage. Right. As with so many social trends, then the pendulum swung way the other direction. And we've heard the quip before that it's easier to get out of a marriage than some of your contracts you might have for home maintenance, that kind of thing. Your mortgage company is going to give you a harder time getting out of their contract than your divorce lawyer. So that type of strong swing to an end, it's really resulted in an effect on not just the couple divorcing, but everybody else. There's something called a divorce contagion. If you're traveling in circles where everyone's getting divorced, it will seem like a better solution to you. So yeah, we definitely address it tenderly, and the greatest compliment I had about the book has come from divorced mothers who really, through life circumstances that were hard, they found they had to get divorced, but they didn't want their kids to give up on the institution of marriage. They still viewed marriage as an institution. And so, but through the trauma of divorce, their kids weren't looking so super fondly upon it. But they were going to, in one case, be buying copies for their kids who were open to reading it to just gain an understanding that hadn't come to them through their personal lives, unfortunately, of why marriage might still matter, even when your own parents were not able to achieve that. So, yeah, the divorce revolution has really swung too far in many respects, and we need to bring it back to the permanency that was intended and built in the lifelong aspect of marriage.
Well, you already answered the question I was going to ask you now. With one thing that you would hope people would take away from the book, and that they would use it as a catalyst to inspire others to marriage, even if perhaps it hadn't happened in that way in their life. What other things would you hope that people would take from this book and from your work?
So I really have come over time now in writing the book and working on marriage policy. I've really come to see every successful marriage, not perfect marriage, but successful marriage, as a bit of a mini miracle. It is certainly the cards are not, they're stacked against you in many respects these days. So sticking it out, staying together is a beautiful thing and should be drawn attention to wherever we find it. So just modeling marriage, I guess, is what I'm getting at. It's one of the things we hope that people will be encouraged in their own non-perfect marriages to still stand up tall and be proud of what they've achieved and model it for people coming up. I think we do need the modeling, so the action, but we also need some words attached to it too. Yeah. So, if you've got nieces and nephews and they're just dating and maybe they don't have nobody cast a vision for like what the purpose of dating might be, that's often harder in our own families. I can say I haven't done that with my nieces, but just to talk about marriage as a goal, and that's what we're angling for, and the stability and security that comes with it. So modeling, but also cheerleading and talking about it. Those are some of the things we hope people can take away as things they can, practically speaking, do.
Yeah. I know. And you had mentioned too, just, seeing people decide to marry and, more babies be born, and just taking the adventure of the lifetime, just having that life script.
Yeah. There's some things we can't control in our life, but, to be able to go with that flow and to understand there's beauty in even the unplanned. That life script is something that people like Brad Wilcox talk about as well. But to know that you're doing your schooling, you're finishing your schooling, you're getting a job, you're getting married, you're having kids, in that order, it's a protection against all kinds of social ills, poverty being number one there. So to be able to talk about that, I should mention it's not just for cheerleading and modeling, but when we work in the public policy realm, we should be really working hard to ensure that all of our laws don't contain what we call marriage penalties. Yes. So sometimes there can be a tax benefit to not getting married. We want to see those removed. We want to see the legal environment as neutral, the state environment as neutral, if not outright promoting this social good. But right now we would just be working towards removing penalties, right? Things that make it hard to get married for people starting out.
Yes, or make it financially an obstacle. If they married, that they would lose some benefit, or that
still exists. So we have the example in the book of a disability benefit that would be removed if a couple did get married, and so these types of things need to be ironed out in public policy as well. And that would happen more readily if we had a more marriage-friendly culture. So it all is a big circle, one thing pushing the other. We're the culture people, though. We don't think that you can legislate any return to a marriage friendly world, but obviously all these things partner together. different aspects of life, the legal environment, the politicians, the political environment, and the cultural environment, education and church life, et cetera. Those all come together. So we want everyone to be rowing in the same direction and to acknowledge that marriage is a social good.
Well, we are glad that you are the captain of the boat.
Oh gosh, we're going to get lost at sea.
That's the boatswain guy, right? That like is standing there and tells everyone to do that.
Oh yeah, row, yeah. I was never a rower, but I
know the visual. But anyway, Andrea, it has been such a pleasure talking today. You are just so fun to visit with.
Well, thank you so much for your work. Appreciate what you guys are doing and bringing together marriage leaders, and we can all encourage each other in a culture that is not yet totally marriage friendly.
Yes. And Marriage Champions, if you'd like more information about Andrea or Cardus or her book, you can always find us at marriageinitiative.org or marriageresources.org.